This is the Manny Matsakis Show with me, Manny Matsakis, where you will gain insight on how to win on the field and optimize your life. This is episode number 4. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into a concept called the miracle morning. I stumbled upon this like 10 years ago when I read a book by Hal Elrod that basically put everything together where you are setting up your morning routine to make you successful before 8 a.m. You know, it's one of those deals like, hey, you know, like the Marines, we do more before anybody gets up concept. So I think that there's something to this. Quick disclaimer. I mean, this book is written in a very, what I would say, very salesy way. Something that is interesting about that is that when you read it, there's a lot of salesmanship in this, and if that turns you off, well, guess what? You can just listen to the parts that I think can help you the most, and I think that's probably what's the most important part of this is, because if that doesn't scare you, let's find out what this proven formula for success is and see if it works for you. You know, I've always believed that success leaves clues. So let's take a look at what some other people have to say about the miracle morning. All right. So here's a couple of testimonials on the inside of the book. And, you know, here's the book. Everybody on our website can see what it looks like. And Hal Elrod. And it's always interesting to see what people say. This first fellow here, Tim Sanders, former chief solutions officer at Yahoo, New York Times best-selling author. He goes, every once in a while, you read a book that changes the way you look at life. But it is so rare to find a book that changes the way you live your life. The Miracle Morning does both and faster than you ever thought possible. Next one up is a fellow by the name of Pat Flynn. He's a big-time podcaster out there. I like to listen to him as well. He says this, I've always been a night owl, so the idea of creating a morning routine was never an option, and it didn't appeal to me. Things were already going well with my current schedule, so why fix it if it's not broken? But I kept hearing about how valuable people's mornings routines are to their success, their mood, and their lives. So I made a commitment to give the miracle morning a shot. I've been doing it in the last 3 weeks, and already I'm seeing massive changes in my focus, in my mood, and how much I'm able to get done. And the last one here from a football perspective, this one is Rudy Ridiger, who was the famous Notre Dame walk-on football player that inspired the Hollywood movie Rudy. He's on here and he says, look, the miracle morning is the one thing that can make immediate and profound changes in any or every area of your life. If you want your life to improve now, I highly recommend reading this book. So those are a few of many testimonials of the miracle morning. And, you know, the whole title is The Miracle Morning, the Not So Obvious Secret, Guaranteed to Transform Your Life Before 8 a.m. So those are some highlights. Now, it's interesting. In here, he does tell his story. Hal Elrod tells his story. I mean, he has been an entrepreneur in his life. He was a really top-performing salesperson in Cutco, which, you know, a few years back, my quarterback in Emporia State, Trent Fuller, was selling Cutco, and I still have those knives. They're the best knives. And this is not an infomercial for Cutco, but they are fantastic knives. And so Hal started out selling those, and when he was young, he had a devastating car accident that literally he was on death's door. And then he came back a bit and started working his life, making things happen. He rebuilt his life, and really then he crashed again, but this time he crashed financially. And so when you look at what, you know, this guy has been through, he wrote a book before this, and it was successful, very successful, but the publisher took all the money and ran away. So that was how he lost a bunch of money financially. And then he just said, hey, look, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get my life in order and so forth. And the end product is this book, The Miracle Morning. And starting off, I think there's some key points in here that make a lot of sense. You know, it's what I recently read that makes a lot of sense to me. It's the average American is 20 pounds overweight, $10,000 in debt, slightly depressed, dislikes his or her job, and has less than one close friend. Imagine that, less than one. So you have no close friends. So it's wild to think that that is the average American. And even if some of this is true, we have some serious waking up to do. And I think waking up, it leads us right into the miracle morning. Now, he does discuss the concept of creating your level 10. And when he does this, when I started reading it, I started thinking like, oh, okay, I've heard some of this stuff before. And it's interesting how you hear things but you don't really get it, you know, and a lot of this, the creating your level 10 is something that Tony Robbins has used in some of his motivational speeches and seminars and the like. So, you know, Tony, what he does is Tony comes out and he says, okay, here's your wheel of life. These are all the different aspects of your life, you know, happiness, health, career, money, freedom, love, all of these different areas. And then what he wants you to do is take a look from 1 to 10, measure success in each area of your life. And with all these areas that Tony Robbins is measuring in his wheel of life, he tells you to measure success in each area and see where it lies. Now, do you really want to settle? Is it really worth putting yourselves in a position where you're not from a level 10 in any of these and you're setting goals based on that? The three arguments that Hal Elrod starts to get into here are, number one, he goes, you're just as deserving to create the life you want as anyone else. All right. So you deserve it just like anybody else. So don't start thinking, oh, he can have it and I can't. And you're coaching football and you're trying to figure out why is this guy there, right? And then number two, he goes, in order for you to stop settling for less than you deserve, which a lot of us do, you must first dedicate time in your day to becoming the person you desire. And that's really important. And then the third part that Hal brings in is an argument as he develops throughout this book is how you wake up each day and your morning routine or lack thereof dramatically affects your levels of success in every single area of your life. And that is amazing. You know, I mean, you start to look at this and say, wow, what are some of the benefits of doing what Hal Elrod is saying? You know, and I want to share with you early in the book, he gives you some of the benefits involved in this, and you start to realize, here's what you can expect to gain if you take into account what he's teaching in this book. All right? Wake up every day with more energy and empowered with the structure and strategy to start maximizing your potential. Lower your stress. Gain the clarity to quickly overcome any challenge, adversity, or limiting belief that have been holding you back. Improve your overall health. Lose weight if desired, and get in the best physical shape of your life. Increase your productivity and enhance your ability to maintain laser focus on your top priorities. Now that sounds like a good idea there, for especially when we work on all these projects. Experience more gratitude and less worry. Significantly increase your ability to earn and attract more monetary wealth, if that's what's important to you. Uncover and begin living your life's purpose. And then the last one he has here is stop settling for less than you truly desire and deserve in any area of your life, and start living in alignment with your vision for the most extraordinary life you can imagine. Now, all that would be awesome. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, that we all would love to have this. And he came up with all this system the miracle morning out of desperation. And it was just, he hit rock bottom. And he was at a point where sometimes people like this, where they come in and they sleep in day after day, and they just feel like they're in their doldrums and moving along. And, he got up, decided to go for a run, and he listened to a guy named Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn is one of the top personal development guys out there in the history of personal development. He's fantastic, and I would highly recommend Jim. And the quote that he heard while he was listening to Jim going on a run, Jim Rohn says, "Your level of success will rarely exceed your level of personal development, because success is something you attract by the person you become." Now, that's powerful. No matter what you think, if personal development is so important, where are you in your personal development? That's what I had to ask myself. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm looking at things saying, my goodness, where am I in this? And years ago, I had to take a look at that and say, I've always been a lifelong learner. I've wanted to get better at things. And I think about personal development and I think, oh my goodness, what are some of my mentors that are the best I've ever seen? Did they have a habit for personal development? And I can remember as a young coach in the late 80s, when I got to Manhattan, Kansas, after my first year there, we hired Bill Snyder, a Hall of Fame coach, obviously. And I remember we would have parking slots outside of the football complex. And, the head coach had his slot there. He had his, I think he was driving a Cadillac back then. So you always saw his car. So as a GA, I'm, parked out in the perimeter. And then I go by and I peek in his car as I'm walking up, to go into the football complex. And there they were. Personal development cassette tapes back then. And I started realizing, as a young coach, I'm sitting there wondering, what was it about him? And I'm thinking, holy, this guy worked crazy hours. He invented the word, the grind, the concept. I mean, he was working crazy hours, and I'm thinking, football takes up so much time. How could he have time for that? For personal development. I'm thinking, we're doing so much. Where did he find time for this? And now I realize years later that it's way more than that. It's how can you not have time for personal development when you think about, what Jim Rohn had said in his audio tape while Hal was going for that run. You wonder about that. I say, you don't really have a choice. If you want to make this deal happen, you've got to take the bull by the horns and make personal development important to you. Here's Bill Snyder, a Hall of Fame football coach that has crushed it twice at Kansas State, a place that people say you cannot win there. And personal development was very high on his list in those early years and throughout. He is a lifelong learner. The guy is a fantastic teacher and educator, and you can see how getting into personal development can impact not just him, everybody else in his program. And we'll get to that. There's a few more things I'll share with you, how I noticed that he was able to do that with us. That's good stuff here. All right, this is called Bulletproof Pineapple Fat Water. More on that in a later time. I actually was just learning about this a little bit. So now, if you take a look at some other things here that I think are important for you to really notice is, why is Hal Elrod, saying in this book of his, why do it in the morning? I noticed that Pat Flynn was earlier talking about I am not a morning person, I'm a night owl and all these things, and I actually, in here, I want to share with you one thing that Hal quotes Steve Pavlina. and it's in a blog post that he wrote under stevepavlina.com titled "The Rudder RUDDER of the Day." And what he is saying here, he's basically saying it's been said that the first hour of the day is the rudder of the day. It's like, think about it on a boat. You have the rudder that steers you. And it got him starting to think, like, he thought, maybe I'll do it at night. Maybe I'll do it in the afternoon. Maybe I'll do it a variety of different times. And when he read this blog quote, it was like, oh boy, let me do this in the morning. And so he would wake up a little earlier than he normally would. And he says in his first miracle morning, which we'll get into the exact details of what is involved in that, he started out at 5 a.m. So 5 a.m. may be early for some of you, may not be for others, either way. But he tested it out and said, hey, let's look at 5 a.m. What can I do here at 5 a.m.? And when I do it, how do I break it up? All right. And basically what he's doing is from 5 to 6 a.m., he's doing his miracle morning. And he takes 10 minutes of each of the following activities. All right. So the first activity is silence. All right. And then, during a time of silence, he is in essence taking it and getting more and more involved in locking in. Think about it as a way to get very focused and listen to yourself and what's going on. And then he would get into other things in there. He would do some reading, some affirmations, some visualization, and then journaling and exercise. And then he would get into all these different areas. And he said in 1 hour, by following a routine that he would solidify later on, that he was able to dramatically change his life. Then all of a sudden he says, you know what? It's easy. I can wake up at 4 a.m. So he starts doing it at 4 a.m. Doesn't mean that's when you have to do it. It's just how it worked for him. He was so excited to get up in the morning and make this happen. And it started to become, at that point, a social media movement, YouTube, Twitter, and all these other people say, hey, I'm starting my miracle morning. And it was going all over the place. This is over a decade ago, and it started to change people's lives, what he was doing as he was helping people himself. And as you started to notice, he was getting results, and those results started leaving clues for him. Now, he mentions in here, and I've heard this in a variety of different ways, that 95% of the population is basically lost. They're clueless. They're not making gains. You want to join the top 5%. And that's important because if you really want to do it right, you want to take a look at things and say, hey, how can I be above the mediocre people in this world? And he's saying here that you have to acknowledge a couple things. Number one, you have to acknowledge that 95% exists out there, all right? And only 5% are out there that really understand what's going on. And so I've heard before, like in football, they say, you just got to, beat the people because you only have to compete against 5% of the people because 5% of the people are really, really good at what they do or masters of it. So just show up and become a master and you have an opportunity to get really good and have a good record. So over time, once you get your program established, you could do that. So, as he goes through this, and he's talking about this, he wants you to identify the causes of mediocrity and so forth, and realize that so much of this is rear view mirror syndrome. And it's like looking in the past, thinking that is who you are right now. And you just got to realize that's just the way this deal is. So who we were is not who we are. And what's interesting is that if you look at this and say, you know what? I keep having the same thoughts over and over. And what what's amazing about it is when they start to register the thoughts people are having, 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day we have throughout the day, and 95% are the same thoughts. So it's very difficult to make things change. So this 5% is very interesting as a way to rise above. So your past does not equal your future. You don't want to place unnecessary limitations on what you want for your life, and you want to think bigger. Remember where you are as a result of who you were, but where you go depends entirely on who you choose to be from this moment on. So you can make a change at any point in time, and that's what Hal Elrod is. He's pontificating right here, telling you this, and that's how you want to work through this. And so I think another point of value for a football coach is you start to take a look within yourself, within your staff, within your players, of where you're isolating certain incidents. It's almost like, well, think of it this way. How you do anything is how you do everything. So you go into your locker room and you see how's that showing up right now? Or how are things organized? Are the players' helmets in the right place? Are their shoes there? Or is there stuff all over the floor? How are you showing up is basically going to tell you how you're going to play on game day. And how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think a lot of young men today don't get that when we're coaching them. They don't realize the key in everything that we do is basically affects who we're becoming. So you can't just sit there and say, you know what, I'll do it now. I won't do it now. I'll just procrastinate, take some time off. Eventually, it'll be okay. It'll all work itself out. And I think that is the root of mediocrity and putting yourself in a downward spiral as a player, as a coach, when you just assume it's just time will sort of work this deal out. And if you start to take a look at certain bad habits that a player might have or you may have, and notice how much time it takes away from your day and getting things done, that can make some things pretty difficult. Now, the next thing that I gleaned from this book that I thought was very powerful was something that, I think about like my father growing up. He was always like, hey, you better watch who you're hanging out with. And he was right. He's totally right on this deal because, a mediocre circle of influence is probably one of the top, I'm not saying number one, but one of the top reasons that we don't rise to the level we want to rise to. And, I tell our players that, who are you associating with? We become the average of the 5 people we spend time with. If you haven't heard that before, but, I think about so many times in my life when I have achieved certain things, I've been fortunate because I was amongst good people. And what's crazy about it is I can remember leaving Kansas State, going to Hofstra out in New York, and the work ethic that I had helped me so much there. Not to say that people weren't working hard at Hofstra, but I did notice that. And I also recall Bob Stoops mentioning that, he left Kansas State and then he went to the University of Florida and was like working in K-State mode when he got there. And he noticed that, wow, he's able to get so many things done. Then he started to balance things out in his life and so forth. But, it is who you hang out with. It is how the influences of people that you hang out with can get you to play at a higher level. And I think as a coach, it's important to seek out the best people. You want to join a group, a mastermind group per se, as you think through what that would look like for you personally. What can you do to get into a group and create something that helps you? Another thing is, when you start looking at personal development, listening to a podcast like this, websites, blogs, YouTube. It's not like it used to be years ago before I even started coaching where this stuff didn't even exist. You could, the only way to learn anything, you just read a book, and you were fortunate you couldn't always go learn from those masters. You couldn't reach out to these guys. You'd have to write letters to them and hope you got a response. It's very difficult, but I think finding that in your life is really important. Next area that I think is I would say, the single most significant cause of mediocrity that he states in here is the lack of urgency. And I see this so much. If there's something I can tell a young coach or somebody getting in the profession, if you really want to make a change, get urgent. It just is amazing to me how many young coaches think that, it's just going to happen. And they don't get urgent about what it is they want, because you're not going to impress anybody in the profession. And I've seen good guys, like really good people, literally lose their job because of a lack of urgency. And it causes mediocrity. And what happens is, if one guy's urgent on the staff and one guy's not, the sheer level of difference with that and the results that transpire make a big difference. And there's a lot of friction that comes from that. So in this profession, it's vital that you are urgent. And we all want to be, we dream, I want to be the head coach of so-and-so. I want to do this. Well, at some point you have to draw your line in the sand and say, this is who I'm going to be and this is how this is going to work out. You have to make a decision. You have to make a decision. All this stuff before that causes mediocrity or contributes to mediocrity, you make a decision and make sure you cut off from any other possibility and just get after it. I mean, think about the word decision. It's comes from the Latin, like think of incision, decision, cut it off. In other words, make a decision and don't be wishy-washy about it. It's like, what do you really want? And then let's get after it. Ask yourself this: why'd you wake up this morning? Why did you wake up? It's like you can choose a variety of reasons to say, I woke up because the sun came up or so forth. Why did you bother getting out of bed this morning? Just think about that for a second. Why do you wake up most mornings? Why do you leave the comfort of your warm, cozy bed? Is it because you want to? Or do you delay waking up until you absolutely have to? It's like you have to make a decision, and you've got to decide to wake up with determination. And that is what, he's talking about here. And there are some great early risers that I never realized who these different people were. They were consistently very famous people that were early risers. Oprah Winfrey, John Gruden, Bill Gates, my fellow Greek, Aristotle, Albert Einstein. You look at that, those are some people over time that just used to always woke up early. So let's say you still don't get it and you say, I don't know, I hate, like Pat Flynn said earlier, I'm not a morning person, but you need to give it a try, because obviously if these people are getting some results, why not at least test this out and find out if that works for you? So, I always thought, growing up, you would hear different people, maybe it was a wives' tale, maybe it was something else, that they say, you got to get 8 hours of sleep or something, so forth. How much sleep do you really need? Well, I think you need as much as you believe you need in one area, but sleep deprivation, as I have researched, can definitely be a struggle for you, for me and you. So you really want to watch the type of sleep that you're getting, I think, is what's very important. And I've noticed when I use something called a sleep application, where I can gauge how my sleep is, how much REM sleep I'm getting, and so forth. And it will tell me if I'm getting enough deep sleep. So there are ways to gauge that from a scientific perspective. But I think number one is you can experiment and find out what works for you. Now, I've tried a few, and basically, here's what happens. If I tell myself I'm going to wake up energized and ready to go, I generally do. And that is where I see the amount of sleep and waking up. And it is also, I think it depends on where you are at a certain point in your life. How do you know, when let's say you got a child, and they don't go to bed, or they're up at night crying or anything like that, that's going to not give you as good a sleep as you might not. So it depending on where you are in your life, sleep can change, and there are some ways to hack that, so to speak, that are worth taking a look at. Even if it's like, hey, take a 20-minute nap in the middle of the day or whenever you need to be able to recharge. But I think waking up early is what's important when you're looking at this miracle morning. And there's 6 parts of the routine. So if you think of it this way, 6 parts of the routine, 10 minutes each. And let's say you start at 5 and you wrap up at 6, and he calls them the life savers. All right, 6 practices he guarantees to save you from a life of unfulfilled potential. So let's take a look at these 6 practices. Number 1 is silence. All right. And silence can come in a few different ways. One, you can choose to meditate. Some people do that. There's different kinds. There's guided meditation. And then is one way where you're listening to somebody say something to you. There's other things where you can meditate and deal with your brain waves and see how they do, and you're focusing in on that. That's one way to do it. Another way to get into silence would be prayer. You can use your Bible if that's the case, whatever your religion of choice is, or your book might be. You could use prayer, reflection, deep breathing. He talks about that, and then he also talks about belly breathing as well when you're doing your deep breathing. And then gratitude. So those are some things that are the S in the savers. SAVERS is an acronym that we would use. So that's the first one, silence. So you come up, you find 10 minutes and get silent. And generally you want to do this after you've brushed your teeth, you got everything set up. And I will say this, that before you do your routine, it's always nice, like anything, to get everything set up in advance, to put everything out. If you got your clothes, put them out in advance so you don't have to, you don't have to mess with your routine. It make it easy for you to get through it. So if you're going to shower right first thing, that's fine. If not, then you want to make sure you brush your teeth, get water, all that stuff before this thing starts. So let's say it does start at 5 o'clock. In the first 10 minutes, it's up to 5:10. You've worked on silence. Then the next one, the A stands for affirmations. I was thinking about, and he talks about Muhammad Ali. I am the greatest, and well, he was. And because, what Ali used to say is it's the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. Once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. And I think Muhammad Ali is correct in that, because you could see his sheer confidence that he would get by saying, I am the greatest. You also see in football, a lot of times you've got, there's teams I've seen, they'll do the haka, University of Hawaii and some of there's some schools in Texas that are doing that. And they're basically creating an affirmation of some type. The All Blacks are my favorite of all the hakas out there. And what happens is they're actually engaging their body into it, which becomes even more, or an affirmation becomes what I would call an incantation. And you keep saying some over and over and over, and you start to believe that. So that's the A, or affirmations. Then the next is V for visualization. And great athletes, they see it before it happens. You hear about Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, all these. Like, I saw the shot before I ever hit it and where it landed. It doesn't matter. It's basketball, football, any sport. If you see it before it happens, that's awesome. Now, what you can do in that 10-minute segment for visualization, as he mentions, is you want to be pretty much in the picture, not a spectator. You don't want to be watching. You want to be like right in it and see everything around you to make that happen. Another area when it comes to visualization, and I would recommend, and we'll put the link on this for you, Christine Kane, Kane. She is an expert at vision boards. And, have you ever put like photos on the fridge, hey, I want to play like this guy. I want Ray Lewis or whoever if I'm a linebacker. And, they're a vision of what it is you want to become. And Christine Kane does a really nice deal online to share with you how you can do that. And that's the V in Savers, okay? The E is exercise, and obviously exercise is important. You're only talking about 10 minutes initially in this 1 hour miracle morning routine, but if you exercise, start slow, move consistently, just keep improving it. And obviously he tells you in here, look, make sure you're physically able to do this. He recommends anything to get the blood flowing. It could be yoga. It could be, I've seen people like jump up and down on trampolines. I've done jumping jacks. I mean, shoot, or you could go full on Jocko Willink and, get your workout in before 4:30 every morning. That's what he does. So, that's, I think it's important to get the blood pumping in there, and that's what he's talking about. And it also, I noticed that personally, if I've got some exercise in this, then I'm able to be even more stimulated when I'm thinking about and creating ideas. A lot of times when I schedule ideas after a workout because they just seem to come to me from that perspective. And then, we wrap it up with the R, which is reading. Hal recommends 5 to 10 pages daily. Everybody, I think reading is important. I think, you can only be as good as the material that you nourish your mind with, and reading is basically for your mind. I think my target has changed over the years. I've always been a reader. I've enjoyed reading, but I think before you even get into this and say, hey, I'm going to read 5 to 10 pages a day or more, I personally make sure that I pick the right book, because there's a high degree of getting it done based on what book I pick out. So I've got to have the motivation. I've got to decide what it is I want to learn and do that. So, and my target has ranged from anywhere from 24 to 48 books a year is what I like to read. And, I just go through and read it. And I like to take notes. And at first I would just do a lot of that, but I start realizing that, you want to be able maybe to highlight and get through things. And I'd like to spend maybe an hour a day reading. So it's more than the 10 minutes he's talking about, but I've built up to that routine and I've been able to do that. You can also listen to audiobooks as well, which is, I think, another powerful way to do that. One thing I would say about reading, and in the last 10 years I've been able to do this, there's a handful of books that I think are the great books, the books that really have made an impact on me, and I reread them. I make sure they're always on my list every year as a book that I want to read, and I think that's important. So you may want to reread the great books out there because of how you're going to just read them once. You never really get it. You go back and check those things out. Then the last one, and the Savers, Savers, the S is actually scribing, which is journaling. And journaling is something I've fallen in and out of love with a variety of times. I think it's a habit you have to create, and some people are better at it than others. I have done them in different ways. I can't tell you, if you're anything like me, is how many times I've sat there and bought a journal, started it, and not finished it. It's almost like how many books have you bought and not finished reading? Those types of things. Journals were that for me for the longest time. And then I go back and look, oh my God, this is 5 years ago. I look at this journal, I never got through it, So a couple things I do. which might be worth seeing here, is I use a particular journal as part of my miracle morning, my morning routine. And this journal I use, basically I answer specific questions. And I think that sort of guides my journal along the way. So here are the the questions that I answer every morning I do this. What happened the past day? That's the first question. The next one is, what were my biggest wins of the previous day? What lessons did I learn? Next, what am I thankful for right now? How am I feeling right now? What did I read or hear? Right, because I like to listen to things, or and obviously reading something that's, and then the next thing is, off of that, what stood out, right? And then the final question I answer is, what can I do next to move forward on my goals? So those are the 6 questions I answer for myself every day in my journaling process. So that's one type of journal I do, and I've been able to be pretty diligent with that in the mornings. And I do notice it does help, because it primes my mind to think, oh, okay, now I'm going to get the day rolling properly. And now the next journal I have, and this is for you guys watching this, this is always posted on a Friday, the video, but I've got this old school journal. I like to buy these, and it's pretty neat, and I write in these, and it makes me think of Leonardo da Vinci or somebody. And after I read something or I study something, it could be anything, a TED Talk, reading books and so forth, whatever they are. And I go back and I come in here and I transcribe the notes I think are so vitally important. And then I just keep building these up. Now, there's something like this. I may do it daily. I may do it 2 or 3 times a week. I may do it once a week. But this is another type of a journal I think is powerful to use. And, it's funny, as I was putting this segment together, I started thinking about, hey, let me just show you guys something. I went back and I pulled this old journal out. Not my first. It's the first one that I finished from front to back, which is awesome. And it was. Let me just share this with you here. So I look at this, and it's like, oh my goodness! I started February 4th, 2001. Okay, 2001, and. I'm looking at this journal I went through, and it was, as the season was going along, 2001, what was I doing? And I went all the way through the year and would document everything I was doing back in those days. And just studying things. Sometimes I would, I'd come out and I'd put like, hey, here's a graph of, something that I learned. And I think there's a variety of different ways to do that. And I just, it was pretty neat for me to go back and review this, because I think if you review your journal, it has even more power to help you moving forward. And what I've done, and I've done it in different ways, I actually create an index. So I get an index card at the end, and as I go through, and it's like, oh, okay, like for instance, in 2001, I've got something in here, football operations on pages 3, 76, 92. So I go back through and I give categories to all the different topics I might have been, working on. Back then I got program organization, pages 1 and 2. 9 and 10, pages 100 to 103. So I go through all these, and anything comes up, training camp, the program, personal excellence, recruiting calls, ideas, you name it. Oh, here's something on punt return. I'm looking at this, and, if I want to study that page 128, because I label all these out here, and let's look at what we were doing on our punt return at that point in time. Oh, well, that's pretty cool. I've got a graph in there of, that would be pretty famous for some guys in Lubbock, Texas. This was, this was when I was coaching special teams at Texas Tech, and that October. And basically this weekend against Nebraska, we had 2 punt returns for touchdowns. It's, we're doing really well with this. Wes Welker, what he was able to do on a punt return against Texas A&M, that's in here. So our punt return must have been really good back then. I can look back and see we were doing a wall return at the time. This is how it works. So it's pretty neat to have this as opposed to say, let me just go watch some video of something, because it actually helps the thought process. And hopefully that gives you some insight on the miracle morning and what Hal Elrod has been able to teach. Now, like I said, there's a lot more to this book than just meets the eye. It's not a very lengthy book, so I'd highly recommend reading it. I think it's fantastic in many ways, and you can get results by just doing this. Now, moving on a little bit more from this particular book, it's time now for some tips and reminders. And in this segment here, this is an inside access segment. I do a variety of different things on this, but I like to share with you some things in my life that I think are important, what you can utilize in your approach to optimize your life more than anything else. Let's talk about one of my favorite things that I've spoken about and will continue to share with you. And these are, this is an essential oil called peppermint. All right, peppermint. This doTERRA essential oil, peppermint, is fantastic. It's my favorite oil. It's the one I go through the most. I think our players love it. I know our players love it, and I've been using it for a while. But in this bottle, it comes in an oil version, where I can really helps energy level and so forth. You can hear me inhaling that, and it's fantastic. It helps my energy level more than anything else. So I've seen it in an oil like this. I've also have here, you can see this is a roller ball where you can utilize that, and it's got this metal edge on it, and you can put it on the back of your neck. It really helps there. And then I've even been able to get beadlets, these little beadlets you pop in your mouth and give you a nice peppermint flavor that certainly helps open up the airways and so forth. So, I mean, this particular oil is you can put it on topically, which you just saw me do, where I just put it on the back of my neck and so forth. You don't want to get it near your eyes because it's very powerful. Aromatic, I can diffuse it in my office, which I do. I often diffuse this in meeting rooms and so forth to keep guys alert, because peppermint has a definite alertness to it. And sometimes I'll even put it in some water over ice. Not all essential oils can you actually take internally. This particular one you can, and that's why I like it so much. So I can take it that way, but we use it here for energy, and I use it on the sidelines every single game. We make sure that sometimes our coaches will have it, and we'll have the players inhale it. Sometimes if we've got some of our players might be struggling with congestion and so forth, we can put like 1 drop on their palm and then lay it up on the roof of the mouth, and literally it will clear the passageway within like 30 seconds. I mean, it's like you can be completely congested, boom, done, and then the adrenaline kicks in and you're in pretty good shape with that. So that is peppermint, and I love it. So if you want some more information on that, you'll see that on the website, and check it out. I love it. It's my favorite of all the oils, and that's saying something from my perspective. I want to thank you very much for joining me on the Manny Matsakis Show. And if you're listening to this podcast, make sure to subscribe in iTunes. Give us a rating, comment on the show. Right? If you're watching this on YouTube per se, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the bell so you can get notifications when we release the next show. Feel free to comment below on the specific show, and I can certainly answer some stuff in Q&As later on. If you'd like to get all kinds of updates, go to our website at mannymatsakis.com, where you will be up to date on Monday podcast Wednesday, blog post or inside access feature. Friday, video release of this Manny Matsakis Show. Subscribe with your email along with your regular alerts. You'll receive my latest report, Fill the Stadium, a coach's secret formula to build a program and fill your stadium to capacity. Enjoy that, and I will see you next week.